you probably get so very little out of this because this is normal. This craziness that we're going to be talking about, it's normal for us. It's going on all around us everywhere. We're like, what? I mean, it's just for people to be acting like they're acting and acting crazy in the streets and trying to kill people and burning down buildings and rioting and saying all kind of men are evil things, and and that's just the politicians. We're not even got to the people. And this has been told me, and it took me a while as I grew up to see this happening. But the shift, I grew up in the 60s and 70s, so I've seen quite a shift from the way things are. And what y'all think is a conservative value was actually far to the left. Now what's considered moderate would be, you're so far to the left, you're screaming, and that shift just keeps happening. It's like the frog in water or the catfish, and you just keep heating up the water till finally it dies, but it doesn't realize that the temperature is being raised on it because it's so gradual. And it'll take you a while, but then you'll see this generation coming up behind you, and you're going, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Well, I've seen 2 or 3 of them now, and I was worried about mine. I thought we'll be the end of the world. Well, maybe. I think it's my generation that's probably going to finish it off. But the ones coming up behind it, man, they scare me. They really do. Talk about terrifying. Here a 20-year-old man ended his life yesterday, tried to take out somebody that really is non-consequential to his life. In fact, may have been a benefit. Who knows? All right, anyway, we're talking about rulers. That's the reason why it's worth bringing up, because we're going to be talking about Ahab and Jezebel. Talk about a pair. Remember that Jezebel, she is the daughter of the king of Zidon. So she comes from royalty, if you will. And Ahab's the king of Israel. Of course, now we got a queen over Israel that is of pagan origin, just like Ahab. He knows how to pick them. But let's read about these two and make some comments about Ahab. But really, the one that just sticks out terribly is Jezebel. Ahab's got his issues, and we'll talk about that. But man, Jezebel, she's something else. Turn to 1 Kings chapter 21. 1 Kings chapter 21, let's start at verse 1. It says, and it came to pass after these things that Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard, which was in Jezreel, hard by the place of Ahab king of Samaria. So, and what it means is that he's got a little plot of land there right next to the palace. And Ahab spake unto Naboth, saying, give me thy vineyard, that I may have it for a garden of herbs, because it is near unto my house, and I will give thee for it a better vineyard than it. Or, if it seem good to thee, I will give thee the worth of it in money. And Naboth said unto Ahab, the Lord forbid it me, that I should give the inheritance of my fathers unto thee. Now, he wasn't saying, I just don't like you, and therefore I don't want to sell you or trade my vineyard or my little garden of herbs here, or my little plot of land, because I don't like you. That's not what he's saying. He's saying the Lord forbid him and all the Israelites to sell their inheritance. He's just telling him what the Lord said. And he said, look, I can't do that. The Lord said we're to keep that inheritance, and I can't do that. And Ahab came into his house heavy and displeased. Got the big poochy lip out. Oh, he had been told no. And it says, and Ahab came into his house heavy and displeased because of the word which Naboth the Jezreelite had spoken to him, for he had said, I will not give thee the inheritance of my fathers. And he laid him down upon his bed and turned away his face and would eat no bread. I think I remember doing that when I was 5. Just, this is a way to punish mom and dad. You just turn your head away like you're going to refuse to eat. That I can outweight you, I mean, a few hours, you're ready, you'll come out of that. But I mean, I call this an adult temper tantrum, is what this is. This is just a way an adult handle that never grew up, put it that way. And he laid him down upon his bed, turned away his face, and would eat no bread. But Jezebel, his wife, came to him and said unto him, Why is thy spirit so sad that thou eatest no bread? And he said unto her, Because I spake unto Naboth the Jezreelite, and said unto him, Give me thy vineyard for money, or else, if it please thee, I will give thee another vineyard for it. And he answered, I will not give thee my vineyard. Now, if you ever want to hear a message about this, that will absolutely be bless your soul. R.G. Lee preaches a message on this called Payday Someday. It's old. I'm sure it's still out there. It's probably on the internet. Somebody's probably uploaded it. And he's very wordy, eloquent. Huh? I'm sorry? Articulate. I thought you said tequila. I'm like, no, I don't think he drinks. Articulate, yeah, is a good word. And he goes through this whole thing, man, and he just does a brilliant job with that message. And it's called Payday Someday. So if you ever want to look that up. I used to own the cassette of that. Let's see. And Jezebel, his wife, said unto him, Dost thou now govern the kingdom of Israel? Because aren't you the king? Rise and eat bread and let thine heart be merry. I will give thee the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. So she wrote letters in Ahab's name and sealed them with his seal, and sent the letters unto the elders, to the nobles that were in his city, dwelling with Naboth. And she wrote in the letters, saying, Proclaim a fast, and set Naboth on high among the people. Now, in other words, she's bringing attention to him and saying, this fella is an absolute criminal. And set 2 men, sons of Belial, before him to bear witness against him, saying, Thou didst blaspheme God and the king, and then carry him out and stone him that he may die. Over a stinking garden. She's going to kill this man over a little plot of land so he can have a garden of herbs. Now he's sulking over it, but evidently he's accepted the fact that he got told no. Well, he's not accepted it, but there's not much he can do about it. But man, I mean, talk about cold-blooded. She's willing to kill him to get it. So he's sulking, Ahab's sulking and pouting like a 5-year-old brat, throwing a temper tantrum. And this tells you a little bit about him, that he's rich, he's famous, he's powerful, and he's been overindulged his entire life. You don't even have to, I don't have to even give you the verse on that. People who act like this are overindulged. They're given everything they want, and then when they don't get something they want, they pout. And they've learned how to get their way with mom and dad by pouting and by rejecting their poor me, I mean, a man like that makes a terrible ruler. A terrible ruler, because he will sell you out at the expense of his own good. And the thing here that is just glaring about Ahab is he always chooses the wrong thing. And that's not the kind of guy you want ruling over you. Why? Well, he got the wrong wife. I don't think anybody disagree with that. He got the wrong religion. I don't think anybody disagree with that. I mean, because his wife is a Baalite, he starts worshiping Baal. And he got the wrong occupation. I mean, every major decision in his life was just wrong. Now, I will say this. Later on, the Lord humbles himself, Ahab humbles himself before the Lord. And we believe that Ahab, he turned in time. God saves brats too. he turned in time, and that we believe he was saved, just like we believe that Nebuchadnezzar, who humbled himself, was saved. Okay? In the Old Testament sense. The Bible talks about that in Ezekiel 18, that if a man will turn from his wicked ways and he'll begin to do right, God will forget about the evil that he did. Well, because the cross is going to pay for it. If there's a repentance and a turning, you know, and you can see, and there had to be a turning in the Old Testament. If you saw that turning take place, well, the Lord just forgave them and just put that forward on the cross. But doesn't excuse what's going on here. And in some ways, Ahab pays for this. He's killed in battle. And I believe the prophecy is that the dogs would lick his blood and that the dogs would eat Jezebel. That's what the Lord... and Jezebel, she died a pretty horrific death. I mean, they just threw her off a building. But what I want to concentrate now is, you know, I see what's wrong with Ahab. He's a spoiled, rotten brat, and that grew up to be a man and king, and that was bad in itself. He's one of the worst kings that Israel ever had. With one of the, you know, and married one of the worst women described in the Bible. There's a lot of good women in the Bible. Man, this is one, I think this might be the worst woman ever described in the Scriptures. And she is by definition a psychopath. By the very definition of the word, she's a psychopath. She premeditates the murder of a man so her husband can have a garden. Now, I got these off the internet. These are not, you know, I didn't get these from Dr. Ruckman or some preacher. I asked, what are the behaviors or the symptoms of a psychopath? It gave me 13. All right. Keep Kings in 1st and 2nd Kings at hand. Probably you can start turning to 2 Kings chapter 9, and we'll be jumping back and forth here. 2 Kings chapter 9. All right. So the first one is, and like I said, I didn't invent these, man. You know, the internet gave me these based upon professionals that have identified psychopaths and said, you know, these are the 13 major ones, probably more, but there's 13 here. And the first one is superficial charm. Superficial charm. Being engaging and smooth in social interactions, but lacking genuine warmth. Okay? Well, and then I thought about it. When Jehu comes to kill Jezebel, it says, and when Jehu was come to Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it, and she painted her face and tired her head and looked out of the window. And as Jehu entered in the gate, she said, had Zimri peace who slew his master? You know, he's like, do you really think this is the thing you should do? I mean, she's all painted up, you know. What's she all painted up for? She's probably going to try to seduce him. She's got a superficial charm to her. The next one is, and turn to 1 Kings 21:7. I'm not going to give you one for all these. We'll be here forever. Some of them are just very obvious, and some of them have some verses that kind of go along with them. 21:7, grandiose sense of self-worth. A grandiose sense of self-worth. Having an inflated view of oneself and one's abilities. And in 21:7, I think I read that to you. And Jezebel's wife said unto him, dost thou now govern the kingdom of Israel? Arise and eat bread and let thine heart be merry. I will give thee the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. Wow. So she just thinks she could just take whatever she wants. She's kind of self-entitled here. Self-worth. I mean, who is he to deny the king of Israel? Well, he was denying the king of Israel because God told him not to sell that land. Then there's pathological lying. Look at chapter 21, look at verse 8. So she wrote letters in Ahab's name and sealed them with his seal and sent the letters unto the elders and to the nobles that were in the city dwelling with Naboth. And she wrote in the letter saying, proclaim a fast, set Naboth on high among the people, and set 2 men, sons of Belial, before him to bear witness against him. You mean false witnesses. The man never did anything wrong. And saying, thou just blaspheme God and the king, then carry him out and stone him that he may die. She has no problem with lying. Pathological liar. Then the manipulativeness. That's using charm and deceit or coercion to control others for personal gain. Well, those 2 sons of Belial, she manipulated into doing this. Lack of remorse or guilt. From what I can tell, she don't have any guilt about it. She just just had an innocent man murdered. Shallow effect, showing a limited range of emotional responses. Limited? She doesn't really have any emotions. Her response is, I'll get it for you. I'll have him killed. I mean, you know, when you think about somebody that has that power to be able to come after you and to arrange your murder, that's kind of chilling. In fact, you think, well, who could stop such a thing, or who could avenge such a thing? God can. This world thinks they can get away with, you know, eliminating who they want to eliminate and railroading and lying about who they want to lie about. But God is the one that sees all that thing going on, and God can avenge. The 7th thing about her, she was callousness and lack of empathy, being indifferent to the feelings and sufferings of others. I am sure that Naboth, and this is not Nabal, this is Naboth. Naboth had a wife, children, family. I'm sure he had a mom and dad. And now they are deprived of him because the king wanted a garden. Failure to accept responsibility, blaming others or circumstances for one's actions. It's his fault. If he'd have given him that, we wouldn't have had to go through these lengths to get that garden for him. He denied the king what he wanted. Impulsivity, acting on a whim without considering consequences. Because there were consequences. They thought they can get away with it. Irresponsibility, failure to honor obligations or commitments. She's the queen of Israel. She had obligations and responsibilities. Poor behavioral controls, exhibiting short-tempered and aggressive behavior. Understatement there. Early behavioral problems. Yeah, she was raised by a pagan king. She was raised in a pagan family. Evidently, they didn't have any problem about killing folks. It says having a history of problematic behavior from a young age. And the last one is, number 13, a parasitic lifestyle. Relying on others for support without offering anything in return. She had lived a parasitic lifestyle her entire life. But you know, when I read all 13 of these, the first thing that came to my mind wasn't Jezebel, it was a politician. Let me read them again and tell you. Superficial charm, grandiose sense of self-worth, pathological lying, manipulativeness, lack of remorse or guilt, shallow effect, callousness and lack of empathy, failure to accept responsibility, impulsivity, irresponsibility, poor behavior controls, early behavioral problems, and a parasitic lifestyle. If that don't describe a politician, well, I don't know what does. If you had asked me, give me 13 things to describe a politician, if I had the knowledge of these words, I would have given you that list, or at least a good portion of that. All right. So we know she was, and you know, she's responsible. You know, I know there's mental conditions, whether physical or psychological, where the individual, they've got an issue and it's not their fault. They need help, they need care. And then there's folks that are crazy that it is their fault. There's a certain point, when you do have your faculties, when you can reason, when you can read, when you can discern, and everybody has that. Now, you may get rid of it as you go along and salve your conscience to where you have no conscience at all. I mean, you can get there, but you're the one that got there, Any shortcomings you have before the Lord, I can tell you, you're the one that did it. You did it to yourself. Just like any shortcomings I have before the Lord, anything that I'm struggling with or fighting, I did that. Okay, I can't blame that on somebody else. I can't blame that on mom and dad. Okay, because when I got big enough to make my own decisions, I made some wrong ones, and I'm sure you have too. So you're responsible for that. When somebody goes crazy, it may be physiological, it may be chemical, it may be psychological and not their fault. But in most cases, it is their fault. They got themselves to that level of craziness. And I want them to get saved. You try to reach those kind of folks. It's kind of tough, I've dealt with a few of them and I got nowhere. In fact, be honest with you, I just come to the Lord and say, Lord, I don't know what to do here. I don't know how to deal with this individual. Yes, yeah. You can't believe a word they say because they can be a habitual liar. It's something. But usually the point is they got to where they got to. Now, if someone's mentally unstable their entire life and got the mind of a 5-year-old, I'm not worried about them anyway. I believe they're safe with God. I really do. I'm talking about people that grow up and, become this monster and have these mental problems. I mean, God's going to hold them accountable for that. Let's talk about somebody else. Turn to 1 Samuel 25. This is always a fun one. This is going to be Nabal, not Naboth, but Nabal. And this is Abigail's husband. He's a real gem. 1 Samuel 25, let's read verse 2 and 3. We'll read a few more verses. We're not going to read the whole thing, but we'll read the verses that kind of spell out what kind of man he was. It says, and there was a man in Maine, whose possessions were in Carmel, and the man was very great, and he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats, and he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. So he's a very wealthy, rich, powerful man. Now the name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife was Abigail, and she was a woman of good understanding and of a beautiful countenance. But the man was curlish. Love that word. Curlish. And I'll get into the definition. Now notice that she's of good understanding and a beautiful countenance. And you say, well, how did these two ever get together? Women have been making bad choices for a long time. It happens. And she chose a real, in the flesh loser, okay? But that didn't stop her from still being a woman of good understanding and of a beautiful countenance. And it says, but the man was curlish and evil in his doings. Oh, this is a bad actor. And he was of the house of Caleb. So the word curlish means mean-spirited, rude, boorish, ill-mannered, surly, ungracious. In other words, Nabal is an angry man. Okay? He just doesn't get angry. He is that man. He is that way. And there's two verses here. Proverbs 22:24 says, make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man thou shalt not go. And there's just not too much you can do with an angry man. You run into them every now and again. You can tell they're mean, they're vicious, they're brutal. And the Bible says to get away from them. And sometimes I think that might, since it does say that might be the grounds for a woman to get away from a man. As we're going to see here, now she doesn't just up and leave this man, and I'll give you the justification for what she did. I believe she's completely justified in what she did. So wasn't she disobeying her husband? Nope, I'll show you she wasn't. But the Lord helped her to get away from this man. Why? He was a brute. He was churlish. Proverbs 29:22 says, an angry man stirreth up strife, and a furious man aboundeth in transgression. So turn to 1 Samuel 25. Okay, and let me bring you up to where we're at here. I'll get here in a minute. David and his men are running from Saul. And they have taken refuge, I guess, in this countryside where Nabal, they're actually around the perimeter of Nabal's land, property. And because they're there, anytime you got that many sheep or that many goats, and we're talking 1,000, that's a lot. There's just, you're going to lose so many of those animals to predators, and there's not a thing you can do about it. Because a shepherd, I don't care how many shepherds you got, you can't watch that many sheep, and predators are good at coming in, snatching a lamb or snatching a little kid of the goats, and off with it. Well, because David's men are kind of surrounding that property, none of these critters could get in there and take the livestock that belonged to Nabal. So he was benefited by David and his men being there. It made him even richer. And they were probably there for quite a while. So David says, look, because if you had any problems with the people here, they said, nope, everybody, we've been good to them, they've been good to us, and we've taken nothing from them. And David goes, I would think this guy would appreciate that. Why don't you go and ask him if he could help us out, because our supplies are running low. In fact, we need some food, and we've been a help to him. Maybe he'll just give us a little bit and be a help to us. So when they send men to him, Nabal just blasts them. He tells them, let's see, where am I at here? I probably need to read that. But what he does is he tells David, he says, well, there's a lot of men these days that run away from their master. You're nothing but a rebel. That's God's anointed king right there. I don't know if Nabal knew that, but that's God's anointed king he's talking to. And you're not to speak evil of the ruler of thy people, and you're not to touch the Lord's anointed. So anyway, Nabal says that to him, or says that to the servants that are the men that David sends to get something to help them out. And they go back and tell David. And David says, all right, mount up, boys. Before we're done today, there won't be none of his seed, and I'm not going to use the terminology, but let's put it this way, it's what little boys can do against a wall that girls can't. And he said, we'll wipe out his entire seed. Well, this gets back to Abigail. And she said, what has that fool done now? Look at verse 23. So Abigail gets all this stuff together and tells her servant, says, drive on, man, and head toward, because she knows David and his men are coming this way. And she's trying to head them off, and she's got wagons full of stuff, okay? And when Abigail saw David, she hasted and lighted off the ass and fell before David on her face and bowed herself to the ground and fell at his feet and said, upon me, my Lord, upon me let this iniquity be, and let thine handmaid, I pray thee, speak in thine audience and hear the words of thine handmaid. Now, She's also protecting her children and all the servants, because they're going to wipe out everybody. Let not my Lord, I pray thee, regard this man of Belial. Oh, that's not a very nice thing to say about your... yeah, it's not an endearing term. Do not regard this man of Belial, even Nabal, for as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. See, Nabal means fool or senseless. That's what the word means. You talk about a man living up to his name. But I, thine handmaid, saw not the young men of my Lord, whom thou didst send. Proverbs 14:17, he that is soon angry dealeth foolishly, and a man of wicked devices is hated. So, Nabal does this out of just spite. Even though David's been a blessing to him, enriched him, helped him, he just does this out of spite. Let's see if we get ahead of myself here. Why is Abigail completely justified in her actions? Well, she has a bad choice in husbands, okay? But that still does not mean that you have to stand by and let him get you and your children killed. Abigail acts like a steward here. If you'll notice, he didn't tell her she couldn't. She's as much running that household and that place, probably maybe running it completely. Okay? Because she seems to know exactly what to tell those servants and exactly what to load up into those wagons to bring that to David, doesn't she? You know, men, you give that wife the checkbook and you say, handle it. You've made him a steward over your house. And the steward has the right to write the checks. Now, you know, you can say, you can no longer be steward. You're spinning me blind. And maybe that's true. Maybe that's happened to you, okay? But while you've given him that, she had the right to do what she did. Because why? He didn't tell her not to. So she took the liberty. I mean, it's like that one steward that says, give me your bill. He takes the bill and writes half. What? You say, well, he's stealing. No, he's not. He's the steward. He can do that. He's been given the power. It's like Joseph over the house of Potiphar. Except he was a great steward. This guy was a bad steward. But Abigail's acting because she can. Now, if he had told her she couldn't do that, then maybe we could see an issue here. He didn't say anything to her. So, she didn't disobey Nabal. Notice that his wife and servant both call him a son of Belial. Now look what happens afterwards. Look at 1 Samuel 25, verse 36. It says, and Abigail came to Nabal, and behold, he held a feast in his house. Why? Like the feast of a king. Okay, now David and his men are out there and they're hungry. And they're in want. And all of a sudden he's holding a feast like the feast of a king, and Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was very drunken. What is going on? It's almost like this guy is relishing in the fact that he put David on his heels. He said, I told him, this is my stuff, and I'll give it to whomever I want. Takes another drink. And it says, wherefore, talking about Abigail, wherefore she told him nothing, less or more, until the morning light. Yeah. Men, you could always expect the bad news to come at some time when it's a little bit more, oh, I should have told you, or I got something to tell you. It's like, oh no. They tend to try to wait for a time to tell you. She's waiting for a time. I mean, she's waiting really to where he's at his lowest. Okay? And, but it came to pass in the morning when the wine was gone out of Nabal, and he's got a splitting headache and a hangover, and his wife had told him these things, that his heart died within him. That tells me that the reason he had the feast was because he thought he put something over on David. And then he finds out his wife actually fed that whole crowd. He says his heart died within him and he became as a stone. He also felt probably betrayed by her. He's the son of Belial. She's the smart one in the family, with the looks, I guess. And it says he became as a stone. It came to pass that about 10 days after that the Lord smote Nabal that he died. Now she's still stuck to him, bound by the law to her husband. And the Lord has mercy on her and kills him. I've told ladies that had, supposedly horrible husbands, terrible husbands. And they said, what do I do? And I said, treat him good. Maybe God will kill him. I don't know what to tell you. If you just do what God says, maybe he'll have mercy on you and get rid of the bum. Or maybe you'll start getting along. I don't know. But all I know is that God saw that situation and he didn't leave it that way. He took care of Nabal. Now, this gets even worse for Nabal. I don't know if he got this. I don't know if he got this while he was in hell, if he got this information, but this would have been, this would have been talk about pouring gasoline on the fire. And it came to pass about 10 days after the Lord smote Nabal that he died. And when David heard that Nabal is dead, he said, blessed be the Lord that hath pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal and hath kept his servant from evil. For the Lord hath returned the wickedness of Nabal upon his own head. And David sent and communed with Abigail to take her to him to wife. That's how that ends for Nabal. He not only, I don't know if he gets everything she owns too, but he takes her to wife, takes his wife. Man, she's pretty, she's smart. He's dead, she's free. You say, what's wrong with Nabal? He's a narcissist. He's arrogant, selfish, egotist, self-obsessed, self-absorbed, and self-important. That's his problem. And a man like that, you don't want to marry. You can spot these kind of men. Ladies, you know that, right? They're pretty easy to spot. If they walk with a swagger like, they're God's gift to women, that's probably one of them right there. So just kind of be aware of that. Warn your daughters about such men because it'll be a terrible existence for them. Okay. Let me give you a verse. 1 Timothy 6, verse 17 to 19. And this one will apply to Nabal. Now, I realize it's in the New Testament, but I think the sentiment was even in the Old Testament. 1 Timothy 6, verse 17 to 19, then we're going to have to quit. It says, charge them that are rich in this world that they be not high-minded. Don't you think that's what Nabal was acting, high-minded? Nor trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God. In other words, listen, your riches, I'm glad you got them. Praise God for it. I'm not jealous of you or even envious of you. But that doesn't stop God from killing you, right? Like right now. That doesn't stop God from just throwing roadblocks. God can make you as poor as a pauper in one day. It says, who giveth us richly all things to enjoy. When God gives you something like that, enjoy it. Amen? If he gives it to you, enjoy it. But it says that they do good. He wasn't. He is evil. And that they be rich in good works, ready to distribute. Was he ready to distribute? Now, I've tried this. They bolt out the door when you charge the rich. Why? Because they want to keep it all to themselves. They don't want to communicate. I'm not talking about communicating with me. I'm talking about communicating with the work of God. And I just try to say, look, if God gives you this money, maybe he wants you to use some of it for his good. And very, very few people will have it, man. They just say, well, my money, I earned it. Yeah, but God can kill you. And he could take you out today. He could take your wealth. He could take your health. Does it say, charge them that are rich in this world? Who's he talking to? Who's Paul writing to? Timothy. Is Timothy a preacher? Timothy a pastor over at Ephesus? Charge them that are rich in this world. I just obeyed the scriptures. I'd rather not. Verse 18, that they do good, that they be rich in good works, ready to distribute, willing to communicate. Nabal wasn't willing to communicate because that communication is him helping somebody. In other words, if God sees fit to give you that kind of money to where you are rich, be willing to communicate because God is the one that gave it to you. He allows you to have it. It says, and look what it says. Here's the purpose of it. Laying up in store for themselves a good foundation against the time to come. That time to come is judgment. It says that they may lay hold on eternal life. Even a rich man needs an inheritance beyond this place. He needs that inheritance with Jesus Christ. You can't take it with you. So how does a rich man, they're busy men. They don't have a lot of time. They're not going to be probably knocking on doors, passing out tracts on the street. Although there's been a few that I've noticed that will do it. So what can they do? Well, God gave them all this money. He said, be willing to communicate. There's things that a rich, Dr. Ruckman brought this out, there's things that a rich man can do that none of us can do because we don't have the money. But they can. Special work, special projects, special missions things that go on. They can do that. I've known rich men that have done it, and I'll tell you, they were good Christians. And I've known some of them that ran the other way. So Nabal is just, he's just the extreme account of someone that, didn't think that he should have to do anything. It's mine. Yeah, but all things are God's. It's mine. But it all belongs to God. So ultimately, you're accountable to him. And he says, help him out. If he'd have helped him, God probably would have blessed him, probably made him richer. I don't think he was going to, David wasn't asking for 95% of what the guy owned. He probably wasn't even asking for 1% of what the guy owned. He was just asking for a handout. Can you help us out? It was really that too much? It's funny that, your average folks out there, middle class, lower middle class, it's funny how they're willing to help. Local churches don't run on the rich. They never have. They run on the common people. They've built more buildings and done more things, and it hasn't been the rich that's done that. It's been your common folk. Anyway, I don't know how I got into all that, but these are examples of people not to be, and definitely not to marry. So, okay. We'll stop there. We'll deal with self-harm next week. Anybody got a question? Comment? You say you want to talk to me about your husband?